Purple Daily is daily Vikings entertainment. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die.
I will ride with this group.
Seriously, man. Please.
And away we go.
And welcome into Purple Access. Every Thursday, of course, my buddy Chip Scoggins, Star Tribune sports columnist, and I talk about the Vikings, talk about the news, talk about what's going on. We are on June 25th here, though, Chipper. So very quiet, which is not a bad thing. Called before the training camp storm in about a month, right, or a little less than a month. So last week we went through a fun list of the favorite players and coaches we've each covered, and also the top players and coaches from the Vikings. So today, I think this was your suggestion. Brilliant suggestion, by the way.
Thank you.
The top 5 games that we have each covered. Now there will be some redundancy, but probably not a ton. We each know which playoff game we picked. So we picked 2 different playoff games because just to get away from repeating that. And we also, Chip said, it had to be a game that we were at. So it can't be, I watched it on TV and it was really exciting. So it had to be a game that you were physically in the stadium and covered. So, and Chip, you started on the beat with me in 2008, correct?
8, correct, yes.
And so you have been to, for about 3 years, a ton of games, but a lot of
17
games.
Years, 17 seasons.
Oh,
yeah.
Jeez.
17
years.
Yeah.
And so I was on the beat with Seifert starting in 2005 through 2010, worked 3 years with you. I've been to the home games, or most of the home games since then. I have not traveled much. So this list should be a little bit different. But without further ado, Chip Scoggins, the floor is yours. Let's go through the games, discuss them.
5-1?
Yes, 5-1. Let's go through the games, discuss them,
right,
and then I will give my list, and we can do the same.
Yeah, and I'll reiterate, we didn't want to have them be all playoffs, so we could only do one playoff game. Agreed. And me and you coordinated, so we didn't pick the same playoff game. I think there's 2 playoff games that we both would put on there, but we made sure we didn't have the same one, so we didn't skip one. And when I say best game, as a writer, Judd, what are we looking for? Drama?
Yep.
Intrigue, suspense.
Yep.
Weirdness, historic. Something that when you walk out of the stadium that night, you're like, man, I've never seen that, or I may never see that again, right? So that's sort of how I base this on, right?
Correct.
So without further ado, number 5. 2013, I'd gone back on the beat for that year, if you remember.
That's right.
Was that the one? Yeah, I was back on the beat that year. But 2013 at Baltimore, a 29-26 loss. One of the damnedest things I've ever seen, Judd.
Yep.
Snowy day. There were 5 touchdowns scored in the final 2 minutes of the game. It was... I went back and looked at the coverage. It was the first game in NFL history in which there were 6 lead changes in the fourth quarter. And it was like a tennis match being played in football. And it was early on, it was hard to get traction because of the because of the snow and the field conditions. I remember that Adrian Peterson had gotten hurt early in that game. Remember, that was where I think he texted, was it
Josina Anderson from the locker room, I'm fine.
That's right. Toby Gerhart had replaced him, had a controversial, I think they ruled it a fumble, but his knee was down, and the Vikings were upset about that. But it was...
that's a great one.
It was in those final 2 minutes. I remember the Ravens had a long kickoff return for a touchdown. Cordero Patterson came back and took a screen like 80 yards for a touchdown. They came back and scored, and it finally ended with a Joe Flacco touchdown pass with like 9 seconds to go to end it. But it was, again, 5 touchdowns in the final 2 minutes, back and forth. I mean, they just kept trading him. So it was, I remember walking in there and just talking to veteran players who were on the team, and they said, we've never been involved in a game like that. Never seen something that crazy where it's just you have that many scores in that short of time. So so that's number 5 on my list.
That was and
It was
So
at the end of a bad season. They fell to
Right.
3-9-1 at that, so that knocked
Right.
them officially out of the playoffs, and that was.
I forget now because I did watch that game, but was not there. Was that a game where it was snowing the whole game, or it started snowing?
I think, because I remember walking there, and it wasn't snowing when we walked to the stadium, I don't believe, but it snowed pretty much throughout, Judd. I mean, it was a snow globe game. Because I remember, I don't think there was a whole lot of scoring. There might have been a touchdown, maybe
No
2,
traction, right?
field goal. Yeah, the guys couldn't get their footing. But for the first 3 quarters, there's no offense. I mean, you couldn't get anything generated. And all of a sudden, you get to the final 2 minutes, and it's touchdown, and it was bizarre. And it literally was like, okay, Vikings are going to win, Vikings are going to lose, Vikings are going to win, Vikings are going to lose.
You're hunting and pecking up a storm.
Thankfully, that was a noon game. If it was a night game, I would have been a mental pretzel trying to write that game story where it made so many twists and turns. So, and that was a bad season. A lot of weird things happened that year.
Yes.
And that was just another game on top of it. So, number 4 on my list, 2022 versus Colts home game, 39-36 overtime win. Greatest comeback in NFL history. That one, I remember what I wound up writing. We'll start with they're down, 1 million points at halftime. Come to find out, Patrick Peterson had looked across the offense to the offensive players and said, "Hey, we just need 5 touchdowns. We'll shut them out. You guys just scored 5 touchdowns." They're like,
Right.
Okay, he's serious.
Right.
But if you remember what I wound up writing that day, because I was the pool reporter for assigned that because the Star Tribune had so many reporters that could afford to not be in the locker room, that Shannon Sullivan had 2 fumble returns for touchdowns that got negated.
That's right.
The first one, they blew the whistle too quick and blew him down when it shouldn't have been. And the second one was it was a fumble, right? But they ruled it a non-fumble. But it should have been.
Yes.
But it should have been. He should have had 2 fumble returns for touchdowns.
Yes.
That got called away. They're bad calls. I mean, they were bad calls that they made. But
I completely forgot about that. And
yeah.
And that game is not on my list because that's the one I left at halftime to do Vent Line because it was so bad. Phil and Dex were in studio and we're like, screw it, let's just start Vent Line now at halftime. That show went 3 hours, but I was bullied by my buddies into leaving the damn game, so I missed the second half.
I would have given you credit because you showed up, you were there pregame, you watched till halftime. I would have given you.
I decided couldn't cover the whole game.
Maybe half credit. But, I mean, Judd, they're down 36-7. Remember, the Colts, I think at that time, were being coached by Jeff Saturday.
They were
as a fill-in, as an interim.
They
and just I was looking at the stat. Cousins had threw for I think 4 or 5 touchdowns. A bunch of different guys caught touchdown passes. It wasn't just all.
And
Jefferson.
in the first half, everything went wrong. They
Correct,
played terribly. But I saw like a year ago or so, I saw Saturday on ESPN where he had previously worked and went back to talking about that game. And he basically said he was scared because he's like, we didn't play well. They were just playing terrible. And if they turned it around, we were screwed. And ultimately he was right.
Yeah. And so, number 5 on my list was the first game in NFL history where there's 6 lead changes in the fourth quarter. Number 4,
yes,
the largest comeback in NFL history. So, just for the history and the drama and the quirkiness.
Absolutely.
So that was 3.
Yep.
That was 4. Number 3, 2009, Brett Favre returns to Lambeau Field. Now I will say I think we sort of cheated on this one too, a little bit, so we didn't have the same game.
Same one, right?
A 38-26 win. Obviously, that was the national storyline of the week. The Vikings were rolling at that point. Would Favre get booed? Would he get cheered? What would the mix be? I don't think we were really sure. I knew we knew he would get booed. We didn't know the extent of it. And I will never forget, Judd. They came out for early warm-ups. It was boos, right? And then for anybody that's been at Lambeau, they have that one little tunnel that they come out. And when the Vikings come on the field, there's boos. I'm like, okay, it's not that bad. And then it sounded like a 747 taking off right next to you. 100%. And then you realize Favre was at the end of the line. It's like, holy cow, I've never heard a person get booed like that.
The
in my
stadium
life.
shook because of booze,
It
which is
was
impossible to happen,
unbelievable.
but it did.
It was the loudest I've ever heard someone get booed. I mean, it was just, there might have been some cheers, but there might have been one or two people. You just didn't hear any.
I don't think I've ever heard at a sporting event, and we both have covered hundreds of them. I don't think I've ever heard a cascade of boos that
Yes.
loud from that many people.
And, Vikings Packers games I love to cover anyway. I've covered every one since 2008 over there. I love going to Lambeau Field to cover it. But just that one and how big a story that was nationally and all the things with Favre. And and he played well. I have the stats. 17 of 28, 244 yards, 4 touchdowns, no sacks, no interceptions. And they got the win. So he played well, which on a day that I'm sure would just emotions were all over the place. I think, talking to him afterwards, Judd, didn't you get the sense that he was surprised by the forcefulness of how much the boos were? I think maybe privately he was hoping for a little bit more cheers than he got.
And we talked to on our old radio show, Sage Rosenfels, his backup, used to appear with us. And we talked to him. I think we did a whole episode on that game. And Sage was like standing by Brett, and he's like, I was worried for myself. He's like, it was, like no one's ever experienced this before. And I mean, he's back in good stead with Packers fans now, but I mean, he was hated. And look, he deserved it. He had purposely forced his way to the Packers or one of their chief rivals. But it was like, I will go to my grave with that being one of the most unforgettable experiences sports-wise in my life.
Yeah, and Rodgers had a good game too, not to the level that Favre did, but both quarterbacks played well, and just a memorable day. Number 2, this one might surprise you.
Okay.
2012 regular season finale versus the Packers at home, 37-34 win.
Yeah.
That was the game that Peterson was going for Eric Dickerson's all-time single-season rushing record.
Mm-hmm.
That had been really a weird year, not a lot of expectations. Ponder was the quarterback. They were up and down, but they won their last 3 games going into that game. They needed to win that one to get into the playoffs. And Peterson was just electric. 199 yards rushing, a career-high 34 carries. Remember his last run, he broke off, but he was he got tackled, but that set up a game-winning field goal. I forgot how far it was, but that set up the game-winning field goal to win it at the buzzer. And he finishes 8 yards shy of Dickerson's record, but and you knew that was going to be, fans were chanting MVP. He had a good feeling he was going to win the MVP that year.
Yep.
That set up a rematch the next week. And by the way, Frazier telling us that Ponder's arm was fine, which it was not.
Elbow, right?
Elbow, yeah. He got hit.
The size of a ball.
Yeah, he had gotten hit throwing a pass. I think it was at the end of the first half, if I remember that correctly, Judd.
Yep.
Did he finish the game?
Yes,
I can't remember if he got replaced. And
that was his good month. Best month.
Yeah.
There weren't a lot of them, but that was his best month as a Viking. I think they won 3 or 4 consecutive games in December.
4 games to end the season. Yeah.
Yep.
But that day was all about Adrian Peterson, the MVP season, and getting in the playoffs. But the rush for 199 yards and nearly break the all-time record. That one really just kind of stood out to me.
Yep.
And then number 1 for me was an easy one, probably painful one for all the fine folks listening here, but probably the most memorable game I've covered, 2009 NFC Championship game, New Orleans.
Yep.
I mean, that, you're one step from the Super Bowl. That I just felt like that team was going to win the Super Bowl. You're going to New Orleans. Yes, they were hosting, but I just felt like the Vikings were the better team. Favre going back home. I will say is the loudest boos I've ever heard was Favre. That was the loudest sporting event I've ever, arena, stadium, whatever. The loudest I've ever been in. I mean, when they say deafening, Judd, it felt deafening.
Yes.
I don't know
and
if you
natural
agree with
too.
And natural. I mean,
no
it
BS
was
noise.
so. And when they played the the song that they played there. I can't remember what the name of it is, and the party atmosphere was just great.
Yeah.
But I'm going to roll through some stats here for you, Judd. I wrote them down.
Oh boy. Okay.
The Vikings had an edge in first downs, 31-15.
Mm-hmm.
Total yards, 475 to 257. Total plays, 82-55. Time of possession by nearly 10 minutes. They dominated that game. But here's the one that you circle, highlight, underline a million times. 5 turnovers.
Yes.
The 5 turnovers.
Yep.
I mean, it's just obviously the Favre interception. But think about all the things that now that we know about that game, and it was a great game, back and forth. But all the things that we know about that game now, it almost stand by themselves. 12 men in the huddle. Favre across the body. Ben Lieber, phantom pass interference that helped change the overtime.
Oh,
rules,
God,
right?
yeah.
Bountygate. Favre's ankle after the game was the size of, you remember how beat up he was after that game seeing him out of his uniform, how
Yes.
beat up and how he walked. He looked 80 years old and his ankle was this big. Just in terms of the storylines and the really lost opportunity, because I felt like if they'd have won that game, I felt like they were going to win the Super Bowl. They were the best team. And, to this day, I mean, that is I got to imagine it's hard for those guys to live with knowing that team didn't fulfill what it should have been.
I've never covered boxing, and so and I'm too young if I did cover boxing to have covered like an Ali Frazier fight. But that game to me is the equivalent of a heavyweight boxing match that is just like it. There's flaws, but I mean, just the physicalness, the intensity around the entire afternoon, everything about that's probably like I've covered great games and as you have as well, but just as far as the magnitude of it all, the feeling of it all, I don't think I've ever covered a game that had that much, just to your point too, and then fallout from it. Like that's probably the top event I will ever cover.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of the energy, it really made the hair on your arm stand up. It was so
for 4 quarters.
And the drama. And I remember, I will tell fans this. I remember, I think Longwell kicked the field goal not late, but in the fourth quarter. And I turned to Judd and I said, man, they're going to the Super Bowl. And Judd said, just wait.
Yeah. No, they were moving down the field.
That's what it was. Was it for the?
Yes.
Was it that? Yes.
It was that drive. They're moving down the field, and that's right before 12 men in the huddle, so it looked really good.
Yeah.
And you're like, they're going Super Bowl. And I'm like, just wait, man. Just wait. Let's see what happens. No, I did not foresee it self-destructing like that. But yeah. And the Lieber call, which if I'm not mistaken too, correct me if I'm wrong. I've gone back and watched it, but it's been a long time. The Lieber call, the problem with what Ben did is, as I recall, he didn't really turn around. So he face guarded, which should not be a PI. Yeah. But it often gets the flag.
But it was not. It wasn't the tighten up the seam. Is that what it was?
I thought it was towards the sideline. But anyway, it should not have been called.
Yeah.
And the fact that that was why the rule was changed first in the playoffs about you can't win on a first drive field goal, which has now been tweaked.
Was that that was the very next year they changed it?
Yep.
So you have that
2010.
And then you had Bountygate that came out of it. Because I remember thinking, and it was the Darren Sharper, right? Yes, when he high-lowed, because Sharp was on that team, correct? Darren Sharper.
Yeah, but it started with the 2 D linemen. The first one was
2 D linemen,
but yeah, Sharp was on that team.
But Sharper hit him really late.
Yeah,
and then he got high-lowed by somebody. And I think Sharper might have been on that one. And I remember thinking, man,
You're
they
right.
were really trying to beat him up.
Yep.
Little did we know there's an actual bounty, to try to hurt him on that game.
Yep. There was I thought there was an initial high-low by 2 D linemen. But
Maybe
then you're right.
was.
Sharper eventually took a shot. Like they just took shots at him.
Yeah.
And they didn't get flagged. So they just kept like that's the thing now. Now what? 14 years after the fact, you can do that stuff, but every one of them is a 15-yard penalty.
That's it. And just, that scene after in the locker room and seeing Favre and how I didn't know that he would come back after that. Seeing him there, I thought, okay, that was it. That was the one shot. Yeah. I mean, it took teammates coming down on a private plane to drag him out of Hattiesburg to come. But that game will stand up for me for a long time. I mean, just the most memorable game I've covered. Yeah.
Forever. And if you recall at the time, it's probably been redone now, but the locker room, at least the visitors, was split by offense and defense.
Yeah.
Like a wall between them. And so you went in, and I mean, I just remember the overall devastation of the entire, it was fascinating, but hard to watch at the same time.
Well, do you remember too, Judd? The confetti's fall and the Saints are, they're celebrating on the field, and Adrian Peterson standing out there without helmet in the tunnel, but still in uniform, but just not without the helmet, watching, just for, it felt like 5 minutes, but it might have been, a minute and a half, but just standing there, hands on hips, watching him celebrate. And, his, I don't know how many fumbles he was officially credited with, but because he recovered some, but I think it was maybe 3 times he put it on the ground.
Yeah. So the one of the killers was Reggie Bush towards the end of the first half fumbled on a punt return, and the Vikings recovered deep in Saints territory. And then the Vikings had a botched exchange between Favre and Peterson. I thought Peterson screwed up there, but because it was a botched exchange, Favre was credited with the turnover.
Yeah, so, but 5 turnovers. I think the Saints had 1.
Percy Harvin's first of the year, right?
Yeah, 5.
And burying around the goal line.
Yeah, I mean,
it was crazy.
It was interesting because I remember, it was one of those games. It was the game started at like 4:00, so we weren't on deadline, but we were. I mean, it was it was late, but I remember so much of that focus after the game was Favre's interception thrown across his body. He had Berrien over on the sideline if he just threw it there, but he was going to Sidney Rice across the middle, throwing across his body. And we focused so much on that. But I remember getting didn't sleep at all, worked all night, get to the airport, early next morning to fly home. It's like 4 or 5 in the morning. We're sitting there like, 12 guys in a huddle. It's like, then that took on more prominence than the Favre interception. But those 2 things, I mean, back to back, the 12-minute huddle and then the throwing across your body, it's like just a lot of regret, I would say, is the word for that.
To what you're talking about too, the amount of storylines that were, immediately evident, and then to what you're saying, that came out later.
Yeah, off one game.
Yeah. So incredible. Yeah.
So that's my 5.
That's outstanding. I'm going to get to my 5, but not.
Sorry, I took so long. Sorry.
Oh, no, it's great. No, are you kidding me? Are you joking? But before I get to my 5, I am going to tell you about the fact it's barbecue season, and that means it's time for Stoked Barbecue Pellets, a company based and operated right here in our great state. I'm talking about 50-count fire starter buckets, 4-count fire starter bags. The barbecue caddy for you grill masters is absolutely essential. Stoked solid oak firewood, perfect for your tabletop stove. Easy to use 5-inch pieces that are going to burn for 3+ hours. You can find the products at Fratelloni's Hardware and Garden Stores. So Stoked can be found at Fratelloni's Hardware and Garden Stores. Also check out StokedBBQ.com. That's StokedBBQ.com for their deal locator. If you're going to be grilling, make it stoked. All right. I love that list. I was tempted at first, as I said before, to use the Colts game, but then I'm like, I left at halftime. I think you had to be there for the entire game. So I took that off my list. I'm glad that you certainly included it. Also, just a quick honorable mention, because we did agree to 1 playoff game apiece, and I got one coming. But the wide left Blair Walsh game, I feel we should mention at least.
Yes.
If we had 2, I would have put that on. I mean, 27-yard field goal, 26 seconds left. What I had forgotten was Blair Walsh had made field goals that day of 22, 43, and 47 yards. And the Vikings trailed by, so the Seahawks came back in the 4th quarter, a Russell Wilson touchdown pass, a 46-yard field goal by, do you remember this? Stephen Hauschka. The former Vikings kicker who got cut in training camp. Stephen Hauschka made what ultimately was the game-winning field goal. So that at least should be mentioned, but because of how we're doing this exercise, I'm not going to include it. All right. So starting at number 5, this is a totality play. Okay. So it's the game itself because it ended up being a pivotal moment at the time in franchise history, but it's also a total play. December 28th, when the game was finally played, 2010, Philadelphia. The game where we literally did we get in there on Christmas night or the day after?
Christmas night we flew it. I remember having
fly out
drinks
on
in the bar.
Christmas. Well, at the time you've got youngsters, so you had to leave home. Christmas night we fly out. It's supposed to be a Sunday night game. Easy peasy, disastrous season. Assume the Vikings will probably get blown out. You know, Les Frazier's finishing up the year as the interim coach for Brad Childress. And lo and behold, the prediction of a huge, massive snowstorm causes the NFL to not play on Sunday night. But then because of the Metrodome roof collapse, the Vikings, of course, played in Detroit against the Giants in a competing Monday night game. And ESPN said, no more of that. So what we got was a Tuesday night game, I believe, on Fox. So we were trapped there by the airport, and it snowed, I believe, 7 inches total.
That much. We got that much. And I do remember, this might be too much information, but I didn't pack enough boxers to cover the trip. So we went shopping. We had to go shopping for shirts and boxers because we were staying there.
Yes. Yeah. In fact,
and it was not a blizzard. It was not a blizzard.
No, it didn't come close. I think we went to a Modell's downtown.
Yeah. Yeah.
And bought
stuff.
Yes, we did. I think and that's the trip too, where at the hotel that we stayed by the airport eventually to be near the stadium, the bar was closing and we bought the box of beer, like the box of Budweiser. And we're like, can we just buy this? Guy's like, I don't care. Sure. So we took it up to our room because we were trapped there. But the game itself ends up being a very interesting game.
Yeah.
So the Eagles enter that game 10-4. The Vikings are 5-9. It's a complete 5 wins. I mean, it was a disaster.
Yeah.
And that's the game. And we've talked about this. And I think it's the game that got Frazier the full-time job because between Frazier and linebackers coach turned interim DC at the time, Fred Puckich, they dialed up the Antoine Winfield game plan, which is we're just going to blitz them. We're going to blitz them.
On Michael Vick.
On Michael Vick. Works to perfection. The Vikings win 24-14. So that game, I think 100%, and Frazier, to his credit, did a very good job. Like there was talk about, would the Vikings fly home and come back? Would they stay there? Ultimately, they stayed. And I mean, that team, it was a fractured season. So like a lot could have gone wrong. And the fact that he got a win and the fact that he helped keep that team together was impressive. But it's not that it was a great game, but to your point about storylines, it's a storyline in its whole that I'll never forget.
Yeah, at the end of a long, eventful, probably the most eventful season, terrible
season.
As I always say, the roof literally caved in, caved in. That was sort of a bright spot for that team. I mean, I remember that post-game locker room, how they felt after that, being there 4 days when it was supposed to be a regular trip, and then the way they played against a good team. I think the guys felt good about it.
So we are 15 to 16 years after the fact. How do you, just a question off of this, how do you, in your mind now, compartmentalize 2009 to 2010? Because 2009 was a ton of work. I've never had so much fun. Yeah. 2010 was a nightmare for everyone involved, in my opinion, including us.
We used when people say polar opposites, it's become kind of cliche. That was polar opposite seasons. I mean, it could not have, in terms of the enjoyment factor, I think for everyone involved with it, even, people that covered the team. 2010 felt like it would never end. And because it was just all the weird and newsy and dramatic things that came in. I mean, I always tell people Percy Harvin collapsed on the field from migraines in training camp. Most seasons, that's probably your biggest storyline or one of your few biggest. That was like 15th on that list of things that happened.
Brett Favre's streak ended.
Yeah.
And I rarely talk about it.
And that was Deadspin. That was Childress getting fired, coach getting fired, Randy Moss coming back, all that happened in that month. I mean, the post game at New England that day, the roof caving in. They played a home game in Detroit. They played another home game at the Gopher Stadium. Favre got knocked out. I mean, we went to Philadelphia for
like you think about it.
Oh,
Favre
you could write a
being-
book. You could write a book.
Favre
100%.
being hurt and his streak coming to an end should have been a massive story. And I think it was nationally, but for us,
Just kind of like,
it was like ranked 10th. Oh, and the game in which Favre got hurt against the Bears, where Chris Cluey had said the field is frozen solid, don't
You're
play.
just like killed.
Don't
I
forget, Favre was listed, if I'm not mistaken, as out.
Out.
Or doubtful, out.
Yeah.
And Bob Hagan, the Vikings PR guy, calls us at 2:00 and says, upgrade Favre to like questionable.
which never happens.
I didn't know you could even do that.
No. And Sidney Rice puts off hip surgery until right before camp.
Unbelievable.
I mean, just go down the list.
Unbelievable. Okay, so that is number 5 on my list. Number 4, because we talked about it, because you're right. Favre going back to Green Bay definitely would be on my list, but instead I will take Favre's first game versus the Packers, October 5th of 2009 at the Metrodome, in which he beat the Packers 30-23, threw for 271 yards, 3 touchdowns, passer rating that day, Chipper, of 135.3. And if I'm not mistaken, the next day was game 163 between the Tigers and Twins in the Dome as well. Not as memorable, I don't think, as the game back in Green Bay, but it was a Monday night game. It was huge at the time. And again, it was early enough where you're like, this is something special. Like something's happening here that's special.
Yeah, and I remember Favre had the whole family. They came down to the press conference afterwards. His brothers and his mom was there.
Tipping back a beer.
Yeah, tipping back
Benita
a beer.
could drink some beers, man.
Yeah, and so I mean, it wasn't as big as him going back there, but it was still the first time he went against Packers, so that was a huge national spotlight game too.
Yeah. And he was, I mean, make no mistake, 2009 was a mission to prove the Packers wrong.
Correct.
Like that was his whole thing. So like the defiance of his performances.
Yeah.
I've never seen
Well,
it. I mean, he wanted to shove it up there, bleepity bleeps.
Particularly after the first 2 games, what were you writing? Oh, he's going to be a game manager in this team.
He was.
And that's what he was first. And then, he throws to Greg Lewis and okay, he's not a game manager. This is Greg. Has some magic to it.
Exactly. All right. Number 3 was a game I covered with Seifert, November 4th, 2007 in the Metrodome. That would be the day that Adrian Peterson set the single game rushing record, 296 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns against the then San Diego Chargers, 35-17 Vikings win. A memorable day for a lot of reasons, including the fact that Peterson at halftime had a very mediocre game. Second half, he goes off, and that's the one where he's on the sideline. He doesn't have the record yet, which I believe had been recently broken at the time by Jamal Lewis of the Baltimore Ravens. And the PR guys, Tommy West and Bob Hagan, called down to the sidelines and said, you might want to get him back in there. He's like X amount of yards from breaking the record, which he did. If I'm not mistaken, his last carry, when he got to 296, he got tripped up at the last second, or he gets 300.
Yeah.
But Adrian, I'm not a big fan personally now, and he's been through a lot, unfortunately, and certainly the ending was sad as far as I'm concerned, Chipper. But there was moments from 2007, his rookie year, through 2012 plus, that were just special, unbelievably special, and that was one that was special.
Yeah, that day sticks out. I mean, that was like a series of highlights. I mean, I go back to 2009, the run against Cleveland. Was that the opener? Yeah.
Stomp?
Where the one down, yeah. He had one against Pittsburgh, I remember, where he...
That was the stomp, the safety.
That was the stomp. The Cleveland ones were the shove arm, and he pushes the guy out of bounds.
Which I think was the SI cover the next week.
Yeah, but, I mean, that whole game, I wasn't there, but watched it on TV, and that was sort of okay, this guy is different type of game.
Yes. Yeah, he literally punished people, and it was unbelievable. But I also, and again, this is a story that we didn't know till way after the fact. I love the fact the PR department had to basically call down to get him back in the game because he's going to break the record. Can you imagine if they hadn't?
Oh, and that happens a lot in today's world where, we're just PR are more savvy about, hey, let's get this guy the record,
Yeah, yeah. So that is number 3. Number 2, you brought up the Greg Lewis catch.
Yeah.
So the Vikings beat the Niners 27-24. It was a 32-yard Favre missile to a guy who was in because Percy Harvin came out because he was too tired to stay in. It's a phenomenal catch, back of the end zone, 2 seconds left, and without a doubt, like among the how do you know 2009 has turned special, that's game 3, home opener. That was the, oh my God, what are we watching here moment.
I think we started Access Vikings video, post-game video that day was with buckle your seatbelt, boys. I mean, that's when you knew, because you remember the first 2 games, it was just kind of easing in. It was just kind of Favre managing it, and there's a lot of Peterson, but nothing that really led you to believe that Favre was going to have an MVP type season. It was just going to be, he was going to manage the games. And then he throws that pass where I still don't know how Greg Lewis caught it with about, a millimeter of a space to get his foot down.
Yeah.
And that's when we all said, okay, this is going to be a ride. He has some magic still in him. His arm is fine. Because remember, he had the surgically repaired, and that was talk about how much does he even have left in his arm, right? And that's when you knew that season and that team had a chance to be pretty special.
Yeah, and you're right, though. That catch is still one of the most phenomenal catches. That was a missile. He had to jump, and he had to come down inbounds. So he basically, one hand, he pulls it in. He comes down in bounds. It is one of the most incredible things. But also, from Favre's standpoint, he gets around a defender.
Yeah.
He was under pressure.
He's rolling and throws it.
Yeah. And his hands were so big that he basically could hold the ball. Like a lot of guys fumble there. He doesn't. But yeah, that went, because if I'm correct on this, the season opened in Cleveland with a convincing win. But that was AP. They went to Detroit, and it was nothing special. Favre was, in fact, I think that's the one where we started to write, okay, he's going to manage games. It's going to be good because the alternatives aren't good. And then I don't know if he got wind of that or what, but San Francisco was just like an entirely different thing. And it sort of went from being, oh, this could be fun to, yeah, this is going to be incredible. And it was an incredible ride. Yeah. And then number 1 is my playoff game, the Minneapolis Miracle, January 4th, 2018. In what would have been a meltdown that we would have talked about to this day. I mean, the Vikings at halftime were dominating. And as I recall, the Saints came out, and Drew Brees, great appreciation for phenomenal second half.
He was, do you have his stats there? I mean,
I can find them.
Had that game turned out a different way, that would have been a Drew Brees. There have been tributes for weeks about that performance he had, if I remember it correct.
And what happens, like, let's go to an alternate universe for the Vikings. If they blow that lead, because the defense got exposed, if they blow that lead and they lose that game, because the next year they signed Cousins, which, by the way, they still might have done. But that would have been a colossal meltdown by Zimmer's boys. Yes. Like, what happens if they blow that game? Because they came this far from blowing that game.
Yes, and how would we have viewed Mike Zimmer's tenure if they lost?
That's what I'm saying.
It's interesting because at the end of games, Start Tribune, we have a row. We right at the end, before it's over, we start saying, okay, who's writing what? What's your angle? I remember we sort of had a plan. We're like, okay, if this ends the way it is, and then that play happens, and all of a sudden, okay, the entire plan's ripped up and out the window, and it's a mad scramble. You just can't believe what you just saw.
Right,
a guy flies, right by.
But does Mike last as long then? Because, I mean, that took you to the conference championship game. You get blown out there, but you went to the conference championship game. And then I think the overall tone coming out of 17 was, hey, Case Keenum, nice job, but he got to go. And,
Horseshoe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but if you blow the Saints game, that's on Mike because his defense came apart. Credit to Sean Payton, too. But I wonder if he lasts as long or if that puts him on an extremely hot seat immediately, because that would have been a bad loss.
It might have. I don't know. It's a great question. It might have changed the trajectory of.
I mean,
his time here. But
do you go get Cousins then and blame the offense still? Because the Philadelphia game, they've said Case Keenum, it finally came to an end, right? But
Yeah.
as I recall, that Saints game was large. I mean, that was a second half where Mike's defense just didn't play well.
Breeze did whatever he wanted. Yeah. That is a great question. Like one of those things, like what happens if that guy tackles Diggs? How does that change? Do they go get Cousins? But Judd, I was reflecting on that as you're saying this. That game started the most memorable and most exhausting stretch of my sports writing career because we have the Minneapolis Miracle. Then we go that whole week leading up to set up the NFC Championship game. They go there, and that's, a disaster. But then remember, we come back, and we're hosting the Super Bowl.
Yes.
So we come back and have a week of, writing about the Super Bowl and covering the Super Bowl and all that goes into that. Cover the Super Bowl, get back to my house at 2:30 in the morning, take a shower, do my final packing, head straight to the airport, and I'm in South Korea. I fly to South Korea for 3 weeks of the Winter Olympics. And that's the ones where Jesse Diggins and the curlers dominate.
Yeah.
Minnesota dominates the last week of the Olympics. So it went from Miracle, NFC Championship game, Super Bowl, 3 weeks in South Korea. Whew. When I came home, I'm like, I don't want to see my computer. I don't want to see anything about. But it was
Olympics. I can't imagine. I have not covered one, but I can't imagine the amount of work that just goes into that.
But those 6 weeks are a career highlight for me, just in terms of.
Yeah. Well,
if you're a writer, getting to write about all those things, I mean.
What if it had been though a Viking Super Bowl in U.S. Bank Stadium?
Yeah. And then, I mean, my flight was, I got home at 2:30, had to take a shower and go straight to the airport to get for a 24-hour travel day to get to South Korea.
Unbelievable.
Crazy. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
That's a good list too. There's a lot of great games.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's only
2009 keeps coming back to me as like just the specialness of that entire, like almost every one of those games I can recall something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like there's years I can't recall much at all from games.
Yeah, I have a terrible memory on. You have such a great memory, and I'm always jealous when guys can recall things, specific plays or whatever in games. I'm like, I can't remember last week, but that year or that season, always just moments about it stand out to me.
Yeah, yeah. And then 2010, again, it was
for different reasons.
It was miserable, but I mean, as two things, as like a double album together, it's like one of the most incredible things. So
yeah.
All right, Chip Scoggins.
Good stuff.
Great stuff. We'll figure out something else next time, okay? So, all right, Chipper. See you later.